Hey guys, this is the Infomancer here speaking. Last time I spoke to you about hill dwarves. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say last time I spoke to you about hill dwarves, well, you can go look at my videos. There's not that many yet, so it should be easy to find. Or you could just know that what I'm doing here is a video series, currently dark, but hopefully not for long, in which I talk to you about the different races I've created for a fantasy world that I'm writing. And the inspiration came from Shadiversity's videos. You should go check his page out. Pretty good stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe the race to you. I'm going to tell you about who they are, where they live, and I'm going to explain the weapons that they use and why they've selected these. Why it is that, what the reason is that this race, these people have selected this weapon. Or these weapons, I should say, and the kind of armor they're going to have, what warfare is going to look like for them. And so last time I talked to you about hill dwarves, and this time it's another set of dwarves, actually. As I said in the previous video, there are three kinds of dwarves in this world that I've created, and those dwarves are hill dwarves, mountain dwarves, and deep dwarves. Now, I've talked to you about hill dwarves, and the deep dwarves are going to be the next video, so you don't need to worry about those yet. This video is instead going to focus on the mountain dwarves. And the mountain dwarves are pretty nifty. They are the largest of the dwarves in my world. Whereas the hill dwarves and deep dwarves stand an average of about waist height, a mountain dwarf would go to about diaphragm height. So, I don't know about how tall people are yet. I'm still making decisions on that. But say approximately 3 feet for a hill dwarf or deep dwarf, and 4 feet for a mountain dwarf for now. That's not a set number, but so you got the idea of size. About at diaphragm level is about how tall these things stand. And these dwarves, as compared to hill dwarves, which have very thick hair, and it's blonde and light brown, sandy colored, red, orange. Mountain dwarves instead have darker hair, dark browns, blacks, grays. They can also have white when they've gotten older. However, white is not the color of hair you would see on a young one. They just tend to go white with age and a long age. I don't think I said the the lifespan of hill dwarves. The life dwarf. I know English, I swear. But I don't think I said the lifespan of hill dwarves. However, it's worth noting that they live an average of about 3,000 years. And a mountain dwarf lives for an average of about 5,000 years, so they are longer lived on top of being larger. They are also stronger, and so this adds some serious advantages to them. I mean, hill dwarves were already twice as strong as humans, so the fact that a mountain dwarf is stronger and larger, that just makes them more dangerous. They're larger, so they might be a bit easier to knock down, but they're still only diaphragm level. So it's still going to be really hard to knock them down if it comes to close combat, and they are so strong, I don't think there's any way you could do it. And mountain dwarves, whereas hill dwarves focused on gems and precious metals to make jewelries and craft things, mountain dwarf is what people think of as your classical dwarf, or they go down, they mine the iron, they mine copper and tin to make bronze, and they focus primarily on weapons and armor. They supply a lot of the world with their weaponry. And of course they dumb it down when they're selling it out because they don't want anybody to have better weapons and armor than them. And they indeed, even more than the hill dwarves or deep dwarves, have the greatest armor and weaponry. All dwarves are feared for their weapons and their armor, but the mountain dwarves in particular have the best. They are the best smiths. They are the best miners. They are dangerous. And just like the hill dwarves, mountain dwarves have a patriarchal society, which means they trace their lineage through their fathers. And this is worth noting because there are other races that I have which live in underground, that are underground races, subterranean races. For example, cave orcs, which I will talk about in another video, which are matriarchal societies similar to insects. But dwarves are not like that. The mountain dwarves are a patriarchal society. They have kings, they trace their lineage through their males. And as I've said, these ones are bigger and stronger than their hill dwarf cousins. They focus a lot more on metalwork. These are mountain dwarves. They've got black hair, brown hair, gray hair, white hair when they've gotten older. Their skin is usually gray tinted, if not extremely gray and stone colored itself. Tinted is a nice way to say they are extremely gray. And this is because of their natural environment. And they do not build outcroppings at the entrances to their tunnels, and they don't build buildings on top of their mountains. They live only in the mountain and only venture out on some occasions. They don't like leaving the ground. They are much more subterranean than their hill dwarf cousins, who are already extremely subterranean. And knowing that, that means that just like we had with the hill dwarves, we've got the problem of they live in caves and tunnels. They've got cramped space. They can't swing around big weapons. And so they've got their thick mail. And these ones are so big and so strong and make such good armor, they actually don't feel the need to use a shield. They trust that there's no way you can get through their chest plate or their helmet anyways. So a shield is just wasted energy. It's a waste of a good hand. They're not going to use it like that. So just like with the hill dwarves, daggers are a good choice for them. They can move that around pretty well. Hammers as well. And maces are a pretty good one. I got to thinking about it, and a mace is usually wielded from the end, and but you could choke up on it and use it with greater precision in exchange for some of its damaging power, and use it in a cave fairly decently. So they can do that. And unlike the hill dwarves, the mountain dwarves never tried to expand into the mountains. They never got a fear of wood elves and trees. So they have no problems going out into the forest and cutting down their own trees. And so they have axes. And just like anybody that changes their tools to become weapons, so did they. And they've got axes as weapons. It's a cheap weapon to make. It's got good hacking power. They use that. And they also, being stronger than their cousins and being larger, use two-handed weapons. They build bigger caves. So a two-handed weapon is more possible to be used. Again, not grabbing it at the end of the shaft and using it with its full striking destructive potential, but by putting one hand at the end of the shaft and moving the other hands up and choking up on the weapon a little and using it like that. And then when they do march out of the caves, if they ever have to fight anybody on open combat, well, then they can grab it at the end of the shaft and use it better. And they have training with that longer weapon. So I feel that that's pretty good for them. They don't have a need for spears. The other short spears were used by hill dwarves, but these guys don't feel much of a need for stabbing. If they do, they've got their daggers for that. Instead, they just want to crush. They do got the axe for a hack if it's necessary, but they're more focused on the crush. They want to hit you with their hammer, their mace, or their two-handed hammer, two-handed mace. They want to crush you, and they've got the strength to easily do it. And they've got the armor to protect themselves really well. As far as ranged combat, because ranged combat does need to be considered in all scenarios. I mean, if you're an army and you don't have any ranged capabilities, you've already lost, because you're just going to be picked off before you can ever reach your enemy. And being trapped in the caves, again, even though their strength would allow them to be really good bowmen, the limited space limits them to crossbows. Again, they could use slings, but this is a really good metalworking dwarf, they would be insulted to use a weapon that didn't require some kind of smithing skill. So, no, a mountain dwarf is not going to use a sling, ever. They would rather go weaponless and fight you barehanded than pick up a sling that was on their fallen enemy right next to them. They're just not going to do it. It is an insult to them and who they are as smiths and craftsmen. They refuse. That's a little bit about my mountain dwarves. You can see they're different than the hill dwarves. They're bigger and stronger. They use similar weapons, some, and some different weapons because of the differences in their cultures and their physical differences. And we can see that even though hill dwarves live in hilly areas and my mountain dwarves live in the mountainous regions, it doesn't make that big a difference on their environment because they're subterranean. The bigger differences simply comes from their size and their culture as a whole. And this is my video on mountain dwarves. I look forward to seeing you next time, where we will talk about the deep dwarves, the third and final dwarf race. Until then.